For our first session, we have Mr. Jesper Palmqvist, Regional Vice President, Asia Pacific STR, CoStar Group, to give us a comprehensive overview on the last 20 years of the industry. Jesper has led STR in the Asia Pacific region since 2013. From the regional headquarters of Singapore, he leads the company and regional team in sales, strategy, and development for the wider region. As a big supporter of data facilitation, he works to increase the engagement in data intelligence and clarify the decision making for hospitality, research, and investment companies in Asia Pacific. Please put your hands together for Jesper.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Well, it is good to be back in India, Mumbai. I appreciate it. When you follow Manav's introduction and talk about trends and taking stock, which we like to do at CoStar, and look into the future, it's interesting because there are some parts that says you go, oh, let's go 20 years back. But 20 years back is not great in India and in this city because this city looked like that. So we need to widen it. But it is nothing short of extraordinary. What has happened and what is transitioning and how that transcends into our industry, I want to touch upon just briefly in the beginning. Because 20 years ago, when you look at Mumbai as an example, when Manav looked like a schoolboy, age 10, I don't know how they pulled that off, but I don't know what happened since then. But we move back, and then we move into the current sphere. The construction and everything is changing in this city. It's quite extraordinary, and across India. And it's changing what we do. Not only do you have one of the coolest looking airport towers, but obviously 137 airports, over 1,000 aircraft, but the revolution, and it was criticized at the time. Subsidies is not always a good thing in how governments meddles in making sure people travel. But it has changed. To have 163 million people traveling domestically this year estimated because of this project, that's good, but it's not even close to where it should be long term. I agree with Manav. There's a lot of things to say. It's been a good ride so far, but there's still a lot of work left to do. This case in point, I wasn't allowed to enter here last year, but I don't know what that was about. But 90 million people is just above Singapore. Singapore is a lot smaller. It doesn't even cover this city. So there's a lot to do in many different areas. But more importantly, you've got brands, you've got hotels, these and many others that are coming to these shores. But more importantly, it is, of course, the growth that is happening throughout the country. From economy to luxury, locations everywhere, but it's about the product, that it's clean, that it's safe, that it's affordable, that it's diverse. That's happening more in this country. In terms of maturity, we're seeing that in India as well as others. But at the same time, you've got global trends affecting your decision-making as well. And when we talk in the last few months to a lot of owners, investors in different asset classes, people are interested in models. Not catwalk, but the models that you are operating in. HMAs are changing, franchising is evolving, and you got white label emerging in Asia Pacific after success in the West. Work, live, and play is no longer a novelty. You now have new brands and old brands that have to cater for customers that want to stay differently than before. Can your hotels do it? And very relevant in India, that people are traveling to second and third and fourth tier cities, and it's Saudi Arabia. It's China, it's Indonesia, all over the place. You're competing with other markets in a different way now. And what I really enjoy, you remember we have new owners that have come into hospitality? Office segment wasn't particularly great everywhere around the world. So a lot of these asset owners are coming in and say, okay, I'll join you and I'll buy some hotels. And people are looking more at technology and data than ever before. It's good for us, it's good for you, and it's good for them as well. But maybe most importantly, in Asia Pacifically, it's finally not just about the why. It's about how and what. Do I invest, fund, build, operate what we already see in the West starting to happen here as well in a sustainable way. And that's important. So this business is resilient around the world. We've sold more rooms than we've ever done for almost 2.5 years, but the growth has slowed down. So we'll get back to peak in a second. But when you look across the global regions, it hides many stories within. Mostly rate-driven, so average daily rate, the blue bars are up. In Europe, in Western Europe, it's luxury and ADR driving it. Eastern Europe, a little bit more pressure on profitability. And then you look at the Middle East, where it's more economy and demand starting to drive things. And in the US, before the tariff sheriff started with his latest impact on the global markets, what you see there has been low growth in supply, demand, and performance heading in. But that's up until the last few weeks, of course, and everything's changing now. But what's interesting in this region is the change. So when you look across both occupancy and ADR, things will continue to spread and change throughout the region. And it's not just at country level, it's province, it's state, it's city. And that's where we're heading today. So mostly blue, mostly ADR driven around the world and in Asia Pacific. Some notable differences. Vietnam. Why is Vietnam up so much? Well, it's finally a comeback for Phu Quoc, Cam Ranh, Nha Trang, the regional markets that started. We're missing some airlift. So that's, from a leisure perspective, what some Indian markets compete with as well. The never-ending story of Japan. Everyone keeps coming, pushing rates up in Tokyo and Osaka and Kyoto as well. And then you have stability for the last 12 months across markets like Thailand, Australia, Korea, and Indonesia keep pushing rates as well, and India is in there in the middle. It's really only New Zealand and China up until end of February continue to struggle a bit, economically as well. But when I look at the tier 1 cities in China in the last 4 to 6 weeks, it feels like we've reached the bottom. We're plateauing it out, or we're starting to see maybe a recovery. It's a long journey ahead because you need to get consumer spending and everything happening in China as well. So if you want to follow just quickly how India has moved through these phases in the last 5 years, that's the yellow bubble there. And the size of the bubble is the size of the market in samples. So China's bigger. The only thing that happened to 23 was a drop in occupancy, right? But if you move to 25, is that occupancy is back and rates have stretched out. And that includes Saudi Arabia, includes UAE, Singapore, Japan, Australia has moved and stretched things out. And Australia and India as well as stretched. But this is interesting. Let's take a real step back and look 25 years back. That orange line of India is at the lower third of those Asia-Pacific countries, and now at the higher end. So even if it's true, could more have been done, but you've added a lot of sample. So it's grown, and you're now in the top third of that. The rate curve, and we say, India's grown rates so much. It's in the same position where it started because everyone else has grown the rates. Is India more expensive? Is India too expensive? Arguably not. What happened in that last decade? And this is without inflation. That's not a great story. So to Manav's point as well, it's been a logarithmic drive of rates recently instead of a linear one. Hotels aren't necessarily overpriced at the moment. That's my story there. I think when you look at supply in India, a lot around the world, we saw a big bump of delayed supply coming in 23 and 24. In India, it's more about this year and next year that is releasing. But I think at the end of this decade, we see a lot more. So many things. People are here and last night are wanting to add more hotels. So more pressure will pile on towards the end of this decade. And this image is quite new and recent in India. A more mature display of spread across from economy to luxury. That's when I talk about market maturity that we'll see in many other countries, which means you have 15% in high-end hotels. And like 25, 30% including upscale. Pipeline, more of these. But this is not really a fair way to say it because when pipeline and economy grows, it comes late, it comes quick. So I expect that green bar to grow as well. But basically you're seeing a maturity in Indian markets across display of different hotel types. Brownfield, greenfield, all included. So when I look at this graph, I go, well, that's a hard read chart, but it's really saying one thing. India under construction versus China. China in crisis, right? Last year, and ADR was dropping. The difference is huge in terms of what is under construction. So you need to remove China from the equation to see where does India fit. India has about the same amount of rooms under construction as Vietnam. Vietnam is slightly smaller, and not all rooms may open in Vietnam, but it continues to attract some of the highest foreign direct investments, and people believe in that country too. So that's the competition where you are in terms of under construction. Vietnam is about to be the most branded country in the world. Almost no independent hotels are being opened, all brands. And the same in India. In the last 5 years, you can see that about 75% of every new hotel that is open has been branded. In the pipeline, even more, 80-85%. Now, last night, when I was driving here from Hyatt, we saw maybe 200 independent small hotels. So the dream is still alive. People still want to open independent hotels. That's okay. But brand is running the show in India for sure. And that's going to take a while before it catches up, because in the map of where inventory exists in India versus where it's being built, sure, more being built in Rajasthan, but Tamil Nadu, underserved. More rooms coming in markets that didn't have product in the past. And that's interesting. So let's look at that composition, because overall in India, supply and demand growing by about 10%, new over 5 years, 25% new supply coming on board, and rate up drastically. Big 3 cities, lower, because where hotels are coming is in leisure markets and in regional. You're probably all aware, but it kind of doesn't hurt to see the expanse of it. It's about the same amount of rooms that are opening here and there, but it's coming from a low base. Demand supports it. Demand supports it. So you will see for an extended period, you can keep opening hotels in these regional markets, and it's needed. And when you look at performance, this is going to continue to stretch out. Occupancy and ADR. You're now in a phase where everything is up in the air, great positivity, people building and owning. Not every single market and hotel will do well. Not everyone will. It's going to continue stretching. And there's so many stories. I could spend a lot of it. We used to talk about India and say, oh, here's the big markets, here's the leisure. I could spend hours talking about it. I love it. It's so many good things. And Vadodara, of course, you're late to the party. You got government business. It's great. It's more of a comeback story. Then you look at these 3 markets growing great because you have tech, you have manufacturing, you have social, you have groups that are growing these really well. And when you are in the big cities, and let's include Kolkata in that, if you drop one demand segment, it's okay, because you've got 15 others pulling it so widely and broadly, and that's why they keep pushing. Of course, you have Himachal Pradesh come back after the floods last year, but I'm more interested in where it doesn't work at the moment. You look at Ahmedabad, it's a cool little market, great for groups and MICE business, of course, but it's also new supply, high-end. It didn't really have a broad high-end offering, and that's changed, and that takes time before it blends in. I think since Coldplay was there, things haven't been great. I'm not going to blame them, but when you have such a great arena, it takes time because you have one-and-off events that come and go, and then eventually it finds its base. So many divergent stories for you to look at. And that stability is starting to come around the country. We love to take all hotels. Every dot is a hotel in India. You put them together. If a market moves homogenically, everyone together, everybody needs to be on the bus, or like an Indian train, everyone on board. It's better for everyone if we move forward. In luxury and upper upscale, pretty stabilized. In the next cluster, similar, but a little bit broader. But of course, in the lower end, it is a bigger spread. Not uncommon around the world to see this. But the difference is, the more you tighten it together, the more it moves forward, and this is improving, the more mature India is as a hospitality market. That's good news. Now, someone said last night as well, what's last month in India? India's becoming so interesting to look at that a month is hard to compare. And India will have this, oh, can I compare month over month? Well, you have to then remember that last year you had the election, then you have a calendar shift for Diwali, and in this country, of course, the whole thing gets disrupted by one wedding, which is quite extraordinary how that happens, by the way. And I still want to take that story again because it's just one of my favorite stories to explain outside India to other people. That when people came for that wedding, it was just for the weekend on occupancy, fine. But the fact how it impacted, the power of love in India, that it doesn't just increase Mumbai luxury, but the whole country in luxury. The whole country. So my colleague Karan Mahesh is here, and I think his analogy said it best. If you depend on a wedding to grow luxury for the country, that kind of dependency only exists in one other scenario. And that is on a hyperextended elbow in a different sport. That dependency only exists in 2 examples, and those are the 2 ones that do that. Another thing is, when you look at Indian markets, you might look at Hyderabad and say, that's not impressive. Low supply growth, negative growth. That's not a great story, but it depends on where you are. Not in the city center. Are people interested in high-tech, in a high-tech city? Absolutely, and the surrounding areas. Not just in hotels. It's in office asset class, it's in data centers. Absorption rates are record high. People want to be in Hyderabad and do projects and do that for MICE business. So it's not total Hyderabad, so you need to drill down. And you also need to drill down on submarkets. Look at the difference with South and Central Mumbai versus others and the growth of rates. Nothing short of extraordinary. So if we look at that from the last 5 years, how that has shifted. COVID, everything drops down. You got Udaipur, South Goa, staycations, right? Maybe many of you went. You keep that going and it keeps to the rates. Follow that orange bubble. Follow that orange bubble. 23, 24. keeps rushing, keeps moving, just no stopping it until where we are now, end of February. So what's happened in these 5 years is that the gray markets, rest of Indian markets, are obviously spread out a little bit, but it's what happened in those submarkets, stretched out, capturing. Yes, you got new luxury hotels, more people coming in, more people traveling, but those markets have just stretched out even more. But therefore, absolutely, even further out, a shift between South and Central Goa. Again, the hotel classes and what has changed in that market, and Bangalore is still there with Mumbai East. And we have a newcomer. New Delhi, in central New Delhi, was not part of that club stretching away on higher rates. Again, new hotels, feeding that. People are willing to pay in order to do that in the last couple of years. And of course, one of our best stories is, how can you have more rate, a higher rate in a group rate than a transient, than an FIT? Well, it is happening in India, and it's increasing for every year that we see. Now, yes, sports and weddings and everything else, the only country that is maybe getting close to doing something is maybe the US. It's about $25 difference right now between group and FIT in the US. But this is extraordinary. It kind of makes me think, do hoteliers now look, maybe I should do more meeting rooms because I'm getting a higher rate there. How long is this sustainable that we keep, it's keep growing in the last few years. And I also like looking, if you're an Indian traveler, and everyone outside India is always saying, Indian travelers, they're growing to Bali, they're growing to Vietnam and Phuket and everywhere. That's true. How far does your money go? Well, if you pay that in an airport, you're almost paying the same as in Singapore and Dubai. So in terms of affordability, both that and when you look at the leisure markets, you're paying similar dollars or rupiah in Bangkok and Ho Chi Minh. People are okay with paying that money, and it's not always about the price. But it matters how you react to the increased cost. So if in last year you saw 15% rise in labor costs, revenues didn't grow, what's impressive in India, what's impressive here is managing costs, like undistributed operating expenses that was maintained as an example. This means that markets like Delhi, that I put a bit thicker there, was able to be one of the few markets that kept growing the GOP per available room in the last 12 months. Not all markets. Bali's up there as well, but most others are under pressure. And that meant that Delhi was able to grow its GOP margin much more than other markets. That's a huge, and that's also because India started this journey a little bit earlier than others. You got to adjust to the new balance sheet that you have. So you have great results. This is awesome. Everyone's saying, look at the last 2 years, what's happened in India. Growth curves, brand goes to owner. Hey, aren't we great together? Yes, we are. That's amazing. It is this peak. Do we now look back and say, we need to tighten it? Well, the problem is, to some degree, yes. But at the same time, you can look, hey, do you want to join me over here? There's a great opportunity in this state, in this city. We can do something else. That is true as well at the same time, because year-over-year growth at the very end here is pretty impressive. So it keeps growing a little bit further. So then we need to look at what is the occupancy on the books right now compared to last year. Taking all those Indian markets here, the average is about 2% higher than last year. So you have higher expected demand in the next 90 days compared to last year. For the full year, it's flat. But like we heard earlier, booking pace and the booking window is short. China is even shorter, but around the world, the booking window is shorter than ever before. So that could be even better. So you've got some decent demand coming in, and you may notice Mumbai was lower there, but that is calendar shifts and events missing, so that may probably end up being flat as well over the next year for that. It's a global tightness in RevPAR growth. Asia Pacific was ahead a little bit now because it opened later. So generally around the world, we keep coming back to the fact that you're not going to see the same growth pace. Be ready for it, okay? And ADR will drive that long term, but low single digit. So on that QR code, you can scan and download my PDF. Otherwise, you'll get it from the organizers later. But when you talk about progress, what impresses me here is that productivity holds up. That you can get the same revenue growth, that it starts slowing down and still do okay from a GOP perspective. Supply growth slowing down helps performance. You could argue it shouldn't slow down because you need more hotels in this country. The maturity of changing the nature of this country, how you have more hotels across the span of all the classes is important for everyone's success. And the growth is continuing, but it's lower. But I like also how hotels start to move in big markets the same way, because that's a sign of maturity and long-term progress. And of course, at the back end, you have strong GDP growth, you have enviable demographics for now, and then political constant that doesn't everyone have. But on the flip side, and I agree with Manav when he talks, not everything, you need to take stock and look forward, what are the risks that you have? It is slowing down for sure. You are not tapping into the inbound opportunity at all, as much as many other markets are, and by federal or state governments for sure. As cost pressure continues, if you take your eye off that ball, we've seen all over the world, you will not make as much money. That's just the way it works. And you're not the only ones doing this, the only ones investing billions in infrastructure and marketing your destinations. Everyone is doing it. Countries around the region are doing a formidable job around that as well. And the uncertainties exist, of course they are. Be that trade wars, actual wars, and everything else. You have strong GDP growth here, so fine, you'll hold. But the longer that goes on, that could impact you. Listen, it depends on what you focus on. What I focus on right now is the weather forecast for Ratnagiri. That's the only thing I care about when I'm here, because I love Alfonso mangoes. So that's my focus apart from being here. But what matters for you is different. And the important thing is that you cannot be in Washington and impact Donald Trump and what he does. Please focus on what you can control and what you impact. That is managing your cost, getting right hotels built, doing them sustainably, and providing the best possible service. Do that for now is probably my guidance. Thank you very much indeed. I look forward to seeing you later.